Hey everyone, what's up? It's 412 Sports Cards here today, back with another video, and today I'm coming at you with a video, a little different, getting back to my roots. I've done a ton of grail hunting, a ton of interviews, mail day videos recently, but I've gotten away from the buy, sell, hold that has been the bread and butter of a lot of what I've done recently and has been really popular. So this isn't a buy, sell, hold video per se, but it is a picks video where I'm going to outline my favorite long-term buys. And it should be noted that I would stick to the common stuff of these players because I'm going to talk players, not specific cards for the most part. So, rookies, big releases, high grade if not rookie, the stuff that generally matters a lot more in the hobby. But without further ado, let's get into it. So first of all, why buy players for the long run, right? That's a important place to start in this discussion. So there's no doubt that buying short-term flips and cheap stuff can generate greater ROI. But this is money, these long-term plays that you can passively invest in cards, right? And there's a real utility in passive investing. It doesn't take that much energy. And there's value in time, right? And if you can find cards that you can lock up for a long run, you don't have to spend a ton of time monitoring the market all the time. That creates real value for you. And these guys all have incredibly limited downside risk. So they're ones that you can feel safe actually, kind of just passively investing and parking that money. So I'm going to work with three factors today that I think determine what makes something a really good long-term hold. And I'm kind of going to use all of them for all three of my picks. So the first is permanent demand. They should be iconic to the sport, basically, or have an incredibly loyal fan base. Yao was the only one I can think where the fan base really carries him into permanent demand territory. But just because the Chinese market supports his market so strongly. Factor number two is no reason for that demand to wane, which is basically saying it needs to be really low risk. So they shouldn't be able to tarnish their performance, their career resume with bad performance. So basically if they're retired, they're in the clear, and they should be unlikely to have any off-the-court issues, which I'll get into more later with some of these players, why that matters so much. And another one, the final one, is reason for the demand to grow with time. So it needs to be permanent demand that's not going to wane because of on or off the court issues, and reasons that demand should increase over the long haul is what makes something a really attractive long-term investment. If you got all those, you're set, in my opinion. So without further ado, we'll get into it. We're going to start with the most basic play, get up to my favorite play. The last one I think is really good. And something that's not talked about a ton, especially on YouTube. So I would stay tuned for that one. But first one, Michael Jordan. Okay, I know what you're thinking. This is kind of basic, right? Obviously MJ is the GOAT, and he's a long-term hold because of it. Well, that's pretty true, but I want to walk through the factors and kind of provide a little bit of insight, that you don't normally hear about why Michael Jordan is such a long-term hold. So obviously, he has the permanent demand as the greatest to ever do it. And he should see that demand grow with time as people who grew up watching him continue to advance in their careers, continue to make more money, and he's going to stay in the NBA spotlight just because every time there's a GOAT conversation, this man is in it. And that creates permanent demand, and it creates demand that's going to grow with time. So what was the last factor that I haven't talked about yet? This is where I have the most insight on why I like MJ long-term hold. Is that there should be almost no downside risk, right? He's retired. Check, that's good. But the off-the-court issues is where I think MJ really separates himself from anyone else. Obviously, in today's world, people left and right say stuff, make mistakes that tarnish their reputation and legacy, and as a card investor, you should take that seriously. An instance like that with a guy you're invested in would probably hurt prices even more than poor performance. So it's a real factor that I don't think people talk about a ton. You are investing in the brand of the player that you bought the cards of, right? In their reputation. You're invested in it. And I cannot think of anyone's brand I would rather be invested in from cards than Michael Jordan. Throughout his career and post his career, he has worked to maintain that brand, for better or for worse, fault him or don't fault him. But he keeps his mouth shut. And, some people hate it, some people love it. And the bottom line is, he's done everything he can to make sure he doesn't offend anyone. He really realizes, they talk about in the Last Dance doc a little bit, but he realizes just the power in maintaining a perfect image, and as someone who's investing in his cards and wants to be able to sit on them, knowing that the guy who's the face of the brand that you're investing in is that seriously dedicated to making sure he doesn't offend anyone, doesn't do anything to put anyone off from his brand, it's huge. And that's what makes him a distinctly good long-term hold, in my opinion. Try to move a little faster through the next one. I'd like to keep this under 10 minutes. We'll see if I make it. But play number 2, Kobe Bryant. The autos specifically. Hint, hint, I have one on the way. It's kind of basic again. I know the last one I promised is very good, but there's a nuance to this. So the demand is obviously there, right? LA, one of the greats, duh. And the demand I don't see is waning. Kobe's obviously passed tragically in that helicopter crash last January. He's the only sports star I can think of since Roberto Clemente, who was gone so soon. And he was a legend to begin with, and now with him gone, everyone, myself included, kind of more motivated to get a card to remember him by. And I mean, obviously it was terrible, but it is in people's memories. And honestly, it's part of the reason, that I just want to get a piece of Kobe. And I think that's just, people will forever remember him as a legend who was gone too soon, and that the demand will definitely not be waning because of it. That kind of goes into the last point, though. Will demand grow in the future? And I think with Kobe market in general, I think yes, but my conviction in his auto market is the strongest. So Kobe autos have run recently and do command really good prices considering, just how many exist. There are tons. He signed a ton. He signed a lot. But there's something to be said for the fact the supply is fixed. Like, sure, MJ, sure, LeBron have signed very little, right? But who's to say that'll remain the case forever? Judging from how they purposefully signed very little, I would imagine that they keep the supply relatively small. But it's not that dissimilar from card companies being able to reprint a retail product, like Mosaic, for example, that had no number parallels. They just did a reprint of it, right? And made more. It made more money. These guys like MJ and Braun, they can do that with their autos. They can just start pumping them out. And it's obviously a risk that you have in those markets. You don't have that risk with Kobe. They're based upon a fixed supply, and it makes them a really cool long run play. I think that the fixed supply starts to dry up as you get more and more hands in the hands of collectors, and no new ones are signed. Couple that with him being having a huge LA fan base, and the NBA continue to immortalize him with awards like the All-Star Game MVP, and you've got a winner. I think that's a really strong long-run play. Kobe autos. Obviously expensive, but if you can get the best one you can get your hands on, I think you could be doing quite well. It's something you can lock up for years and years. Now, if you're still with me, drop a like, drop a sub. I appreciate you hanging in for the video. We're going to run a little over 10 minutes, but that's okay. I appreciate you guys tuning in. Drop a comment, too, if there are any other guys that are long-run holds that you think are good. Or if you know who the next guy's going to be. It'd be fun to maybe try to guess. But play number 3, dun-dun-dun, the big boy. Jackie Robinson. This is the one I have the most conviction in. The other two I kind of thought of as I was prepping the video. This is the one that gave me the idea for the video. Even with some super high-end Jackie going for big bucks at Golden, I see long-run potential here that makes me not even worry about the current valuation. Obviously, he has demand from being a Hall of Fame baseball player and during the golden age of the sport, but being the first player to cross the color line in American sports is what made him. It's what made him an American sports icon and an American cultural icon. His place in the League Hall of Fame and society are so cemented and so good that there's no risk of those being harmed. And much like the Kobe, the power of increasing demand in the long-run future is what I see as the most nuanced and the most interesting of the 3 points I outlined here. It's even more powerful than the Kobe. Jackie Robinson is a household name because of his relevance to ending segregation in American sports, right? And while he was on the field, his play was Hall of Fame caliber, but it was that breaking the color line that made him an American icon. And today, more than ever, with society pushing and pursuing social movements like Black Lives Matter, broader social justice initiatives, people can't help but look back at the roots of these black social justice and equality movements, which notably were in the 60s, but also began with integration, whether it be integration in schools in, like, I think it was 1954, 1955, or integration in American sports, which Jackie Robinson comes up. When you start talking about black prominent figures in America, he is in the conversation. And I think that as society becomes more focused on social justice and stuff like that, Jackie Robinson's name comes up even more and more, and I think he becomes even more notable and even more revered in American history. He's a part of Americana already, and he's part of he's an American icon, and I think that his status as an American icon should only grow in the coming years as this trend continues. And I think that's going to do wonders for card prices. It's not necessarily a quick play, right? But that's why I put them in a long-term video. It's something that I would just sit on for years. I've had this one for 6 years. And, they're cards you can just lock up, and you think that there's no reason they'll go down, and you have a catalyst in mind, right, for the long run. Always got to be thinking about that catalyst. And it can be slow like this, right? Like previously I talk about, like, being in the MVP conversation as a catalyst, or a trade to a different team as a catalyst. This is a long-run catalyst. This is like what you believe will happen. And it's really interesting to think about societal changes impacting card prices like that, but that's a valid catalyst too, right? Just a little bit different than what I normally talk about. And I don't know, I thought it was really interesting. I don't have the money right now to buy more, but if you do, I'd buy some Jackie. It can even be stuff like this. Like, this is like a high-grade later year Jackie. I don't know, it's done well, but yeah. Anyways, I hope you guys liked the video. Enjoyed some of these long-run plays. It's nice to have cards, that you can buy and enjoy and lock up and not have to worry about and feel pretty safe about and get some returns on. That was the hope of this video, was to bring you some plays like that, which you don't always hear or always see Rationale for out here on YouTube. But anyways, if you enjoyed, drop a like, drop a sub, and I will catch you next time.